The promise of sort of urban development. I want to talk a little bit about this book because I think it actually has sort of an interesting history and it makes some sense for the kind of conversation that you are having here today. We began this book because my co-authors and I were part of a group of scholars and activists about 10 years ago who began talking about the issues of regional equity, about fairness across a region between city and suburb, between different communities, etc. And interestingly, very interesting history of everyone, Martha Matsuoka, the third author, was an organizer for Urban Habitat, an environmental justice organization in the San Francisco Bay Area, went on to get a PhD. Chris Benner, my other co-author, was a person whose first professional role was as an economist for COSATU, which is the South African trade union, and then went on to be the founding research director for Working Partnerships USA, a labor-affiliated think tank in San Jose that did a lot of work on living wage, community benefits agreements, etc. And hey, I was just an academic. So, but 3 years ago, I'm sorry, about 10 years ago, all three of us became really focused in on this issue of community-based regionalism, which is understanding that the economies had become more regional, understanding that we needed to link city and suburb, understanding that there was really an opportunity for cities to once again become the center of the American economy. And we started that with a number of people who were, I would say at the time, really thinking new ideas that people hadn't really done before. And I remember it quite distinctly because we would go out and we would all use about the same 2 or 3 examples of exciting things, right? And then you'd hope that nobody came to the next talk, right? Because you were still using the same 2 or 3 exciting examples about, you know, organizing in South LA or some kind of example like that. And then just a couple of years ago, the three of us decided that what we should do is to begin to write a book about the flowering of these examples, right, that were happening all over the country, people beginning to try to link their own community to regional economic dynamics, beginning to create regional think tanks, think and do tanks, which was a way in which people were talking about themselves, etc. And so we went out and we began interviewing, and we meant to write a book that was about best practices around the United States in these fields. But here's what we found out when we went out to interview the people that we thought were doing the best practices. When you went to go ask them about zoning regulations, they knew about zoning, but they were talking about how to build power at a local level to be able to change the situation. When you were talking to them about workforce development programs, they knew about workforce development programs, but they were trying to figure out how to build power so that labor and community could actively come together to change their communities. When they were talking about bringing cities and suburbs together around interjurisdictional agreements, they were talking about how do you build the power of inner city communities and inner-ring suburbs to come together to force a power shift. And what we began to realize is that really what was going on was a set of social movements that were reshaping Metropolitan America. And they were reshaping it through a set of relationships that were face-to-face, race to race, and place to place, beginning to model what an America could look like. This is not then the book we meant to write, but it is the book we're offering. And what we began to do as we did this was we began to uncover examples in Chicago, where Bethel New Life was able to take advantage of the fact that there was a rail line moving through their neighborhood, and the city decided they wanted to shut the rail line, which would have made it difficult for people to get to work. Typical community response would be to organize and lobby City Hall and try to keep the rail line open. Instead, Bethel New Life went to the end of the rail line to where suburbanites were and linked up with suburbanites saying, can you believe the city is screwing you, right? And they connected a city and suburb struggle to try to rescue that rail line, and now they've done one of the most celebrated transit-oriented development stations in their neighborhood, but based on essentially forming these much broader alliances with bigger groups. The book begins to try to go through all of these different examples, not just Chicago, to talk about what's going on in my own city of Los Angeles, where we've gone from being a place that used to be known as the Wicked City in terms of both its racial segregation and its anti-labor attitudes, to a place that's really rebirthing the labor movement based on immigrant labor, and immigrant labor organizing with African Americans to try to really change the face of Los Angeles. The book goes through and tries to kind of classify these things It tries to go ahead and talk about these examples that are emerging, and it tries to put it all in the form of social movement theory. And I want to say a couple of different things which I think are really important, and then come to a close, because Aaron originally told me that I could give a Fidel-style 3-hour speech, and then just as I got here, he said it's more of a conversation, so I'll never forgive you for that. But anyway.